I want to bring in Alice Gaynor at the moment here. Alice, can you talk to us about, you were in the courtroom. You were in the courtroom for like every day. Lots of emotions erupted inside of the courtroom. Can you talk to us, walk us through? You said at one point Sean Diddy Combs actually kneeled down.
Yes, that's right. I just want to point out the family, they're gathered right now in a lobby over here. I asked someone when they were planning on speaking. They said later. Remember, both parties, they have to put together a letter right now. Defense wants him released today. We don't know what the judge is going to decide. We know government does not want him released today while he awaits his sentencing.
Yeah.
So we're waiting for the family to come outside. It's really unbelievable, the presence here, all the cameras. You asked me about the courtroom.
Yep.
That's right. When this was all over, when the verdict was read after the judge was off the bench, he turned around, dropped to his knees, had his hands clasped like this, praying on the chair. And then once he stood up, his entire family started applauding wildly. There was whistling, there was cheering. He can't go up to them, remember.
Right.
He's still in custody. So he shook a couple of his attorney's hands. Mark Agnifilo, we overheard him saying, "Where do you go now at a time like this?" So I think they're waiting because they have to be here for a few hours to go back inside the courtroom and talk to the judge, argue for this release of Sean Combs. What's interesting about this verdict, we never know what a jury's going to decide.
Yep.
But in talking with legal experts throughout this trial, throughout this process, you check in periodically. And right after closing arguments, I had spoken with one attorney, and he still thought the RICO charge was up in the air. The only thing legal analysts thought that was proved for certain, proved beyond a reasonable doubt, was the prostitution charge. And that's definitely what the jury agreed with. I mean, we sat there, we listened to male escort after male escort testify they were paid to have sex with Cassandra Ventura, or they may have been paid to have sex with Jane while Combs directed these so-called freak-offs. We saw travel logs, we saw hotel receipts, messages confirming the travel, crossing state lines. So Sean Combs obviously happy. I mean, it's not a total loss for the prosecution. That's the Sprinter van that takes the family every day. Obviously, we can't see them. We know they're not going to be speaking right now. But we can see through the window his mother is entering the Sprinter van.
We're told that the family is out right now. That's why you can hear all of those emotions right now.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So the mother, there's his mother. You probably can't see through the tinted window, but his family is getting into that Sprinter van. They'll be back here this afternoon because, again, court is not officially over yet for the day. They have not been able to go up and give him a hug. It was interesting. His defense attorneys said any three of these family members here can sign a bond for him. We have this application so that he could be released. Going back again to this verdict sheet, this is just a copy. I filled it out myself as they were going through it. Again, the not guilty on the racketeering conspiracy, not guilty for sex trafficking of Cassandra Ventura, but guilty of the Mann Act transportation. That was the prostitution charge. Now that carries a sentence of 0 to 10 years. Again, count 4, sex trafficking of Jane, not guilty, but guilty of the Mann Act transportation of Jane. Again, that is 0 to 10 years. He is facing on that charge, but they are relieved because the more serious charges carried up to a life sentence. And his attorney, Mark Agnifilo, was saying as much when he was talking to the judge arguing for bail. He said, he's not going to run afoul of anything you're going to direct him to do. We just want him to be able to travel to Miami, to his Star Island home, LA, and New York.
To see his family, right? Because all his family is here.
And that's where he owns those residences. We've seen photos of the searches of that Star Island home. That's where they had all the guns, and we saw drugs, and they searched his LA home as well. So we don't know what the judge is going to decide. He wants the government to come back in this letter. Give me any examples of a defendant in the past who was found guilty of the Mann Act, the prostitution transportation, who was able to be released or who wasn't able, who remained detained before sentencing. They want examples from the prosecution to see why he should remain detained before sentencing. And again, the defense wants him released. The judge actually said to Mark Agnifilo, "Is that your proposal? You want him to walk out of this courthouse today?" And he said, "Yes, that's Mark Agnifilo's proposal. I know the marshals have things to do, but that's what we want."
Right. And that's why it's going to take a couple of hours before they come back, right? Because that's what they're going to be putting together right now.
That's right. Both sides have to come up with these letters, these proposals. The defense, why they want him released. The government, why they want him detained. The government sounded, pretty angry at the thought of him being released. They said, Despite the fact that he was under investigation, they allege he was still committing crimes, despite his attorneys probably telling him to lay low and not do these things. So they said they're going to be seeking a lengthy sentence when he is eventually sentenced. And again, he was found guilty of 2 of the 5 counts he was facing, but not the most serious. So life in prison, that is now off the table. We saw him at one point, I know I mentioned, we saw him turn around and get on the ground on his knees and pray. He also, went like this at one point. We saw him, look up. The judge said, I'm sure Mr. Combs doesn't want to go back to MDC. And he shook his head, no, 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 and put his hands up praying like that. So still more to come today.
Yeah. And, you've been in the courtroom every day. We've seen his family in there almost like every day, right? And there were times, I know some from your court notes, where he would pray. He would turn around in the gallery, look at his family, his mother specifically, and pray. There was even a note at some point, right?
That's right. He would turn around from the defense table. Again, he can't get too close to them. They're seated in the gallery. They would join hands, bow heads, and I guess he would lead them in prayer. So that's right. Prayer played a lot into this trial for their family. His sons and his mother were here the most. We know his twin daughters, his other daughter, his 3 daughters. After openings, they seemed to leave and they didn't come back until closing. So they missed a lot of the trial, especially once Cassie Ventura took the stand. A lot of these details were so graphic, so sexually explicit. So we didn't see the daughters return until the very end of the trial here. And again, he has 7 children, 6 of them are here. They pointed out his youngest isn't here because that youngest child is an infant, but he's had support from his family here throughout this trial.
And Alice, Mary had asked us about the folks outside and the mood out here, but there were also Diddy supporters who would come here early every day just to kind of get inside of that courtroom also, right? And a lot of them saying free Diddy, a lot of them supporting him, thinking he should have never been on trial in the first place.
That's right. There were probably a group of people who had these black t-shirts in white writing. It said Free Puff. There's a lot of streamers here, people on YouTube, social media, giving their take on the trial, reading some of the court transcripts. I've never seen anything like that at any of these trials before. It's amazing just the crowds this trial has drawn daily. Hard to see because we're kind of stationary where we are, but even to the side of the courthouse, that's where all these streamers set up. And it's interesting to hear them because they're not legacy media, so they're kind of just your average, regular person who's just giving their opinions. And so there's been so much of that. And again, I've not seen that at any trial before this. But right now, mostly behind us, those are, it appears to be photographers and journalists, and the streamers mixed in there as well. But people here around the courthouse are stopping to stare, wondering, what's going on here. So definitely big crowds outside the federal courthouse.
Yeah, they're taking pictures. At one point when you were upstairs, they were chanting free Diddy. A lot of them were like applauding. They're just happy to see that he wasn't convicted of that more serious charge.
And it's interesting because we know yesterday the jury was deadlocked on count 1. So the fact that they came in so quickly and said, okay, now we're unanimous, we figured it out. We know that they went back to the jury room. The judge didn't bring them into the courtroom when they arrived this morning. Yesterday, his instruction was just go straight to the jury room, begin your deliberation. So we know at some point in the 9 a.m. hour, they began deliberating. And then fairly quickly, they sent that note saying, we have a verdict. So
a combined 13 to 14 hours of deliberation, and they were able to come to this. And how unusual or usual is that? Because you cover a lot of court cases. A case like this, do you think that was a little time, a lot of time?
It's interesting. You can never predict. I always say that, as we know. But I really did think there would be a verdict yesterday. We did have a partial verdict. This has been a long trial. They've been listening. They've been paying attention. There was some concern yesterday because right off the bat, it was either the first day of deliberations. They sent a note right away saying they had a concern about juror 25.
Right. I just want to interrupt you for one moment, if that's okay, Alice, because we're told that Cassie Ventura's attorney is about to speak. And we want to take that?
And if so, his name is Douglas Wigdor, and he's been in the courtroom a few times.
Yeah. I'm told that we don't have him yet, the attorney, or we do have him. We'll be coming to him shortly. Oh, he walked away. So Cassie Ventura's attorney, who has spoken to media during this trial, just kind of came out and just walked away. We thought that he was going to speak.
You know what it is? I think a lot of people are waiting until court's officially over today to find out is he being released, is he not being released. So I think a lot of people are reserving comment until that happens. So we'll see. But we know he usually releases a statement. He's very media friendly, so I'm sure we'll hear from him at some point. He also probably wants to speak with his client as well and see how she's feeling.
Because it can go either way, whether he stays being held until sentencing day or if he gets released. And I guess that is why people just want to wait before they make any comments.
That's right, absolutely.
Alice, Cindy Shu here. I just have a quick question for you. As we look at the rest of the day, how do you see it unfolding?
Alice, can you hear what
I don't have an earpiece,
okay. So we got Alice on the air right away, Mary. So I will, if that's okay. They want to know, what's next. What was your question, Mary? How do you see this unfolding?
With this afternoon?
Yeah.
I mean, the judge seemed really receptive to what defense attorneys were saying, but he wanted more information from the government. He wants specific case law from previous cases where a defendant has been found guilty of Mann Act, whether or not people have been detained while awaiting their sentencing. So it's going to come down to what is in those letters, who makes the better case, who the judge agrees with. It's unclear which way he's leaning towards, but he is listening to both sides. So he's at least going to consider what the defense wants, which is to have Sean Combs walk out of this courthouse today and not go back to the NBC.
Do you want to put that?
Jennifer Bisram, I wanted to see if you can get from Alice Gaynor. We'd love to know the actual reaction in that moment when those verdicts were read
we just
aloud.
Lost our signal.
They want to talk about those moments when the verdict was read out loud. There was cheer. There was a lot of emotion that erupted inside of the courtroom. And you mentioned Sean Diddy Combs dropping to the floor at one point.
That's right.
Yeah.
So not outbursts, but all of the applauding and the cheers, that came after, because the judge, before the jury came in, reminded everyone, maintain order in this courtroom. That's very important to maintain decorum. They don't want any outbursts. They just want the jury to be able to read the verdict. And then once the jury was out of the room, once the judge was off the bench, that is when Sean Combs turned, dropped to his knees, prayed, and then his family erupted in thunderous applause. They were cheering, they were whistling, they were clapping, just staring at each other, because again, he can't go up to them.
Yeah.
He's still in custody.
The defense had said this is what he does, though. He's about family. He takes care of his family, and those were some of the things that he told the jury, right, during closing arguments.
That's right. The defense was arguing, he's a man who's about family here. And what's so interesting is people talk about count one, the racketeering conspiracy charge, and they say it was confusing. And in the prosecution's closing argument, they seem to really make a case that they had proved this RICO charge just on the drugs alone, because there were 8 acts that were part of the racketeering activity, bribery, arson, but they focused in on a lot of examples of the drug charge. So after you hear them say that, you think, well, I guess the jury, maybe that's what they're going to do, find him guilty. But again, you never know. And the judge instructed them during jury instructions, whatever the attorneys have said, that's not evidence. You're the finders of the facts. You have to look at all of the evidence presented in this case. And that evidence, of course, was what witnesses said on the stand, not the questions the attorneys asked them. Whatever the witnesses said, we saw photos of the searches. The jury saw, we did not see, the sexually explicit so-called freak-off videos. Those were the drug-fueled sexual encounters with male escorts that either Cassandra Ventura or Jane, a former girlfriend of Combs who testified under a pseudonym, those were the videos they were seen participating in, where they say Combs was directing them what to do with these male escorts.
A very interesting element in this trial was that video of Cassie Ventura, Sean Diddy Combs' ex, being assaulted in that LA hotel. And of course, the judge said, don't rush to judgment, listen to the evidence. But also his defense said he is not on trial for domestic violence.
Right.
Unfortunately, regrettably, I believe he used that word, that this was, that was a domestic violence incident. And at times, after being, using drugs, that is how he got. But that is not what he is on trial for, right? That he is on trial for all of these other, RICO and sex trafficking and prostitution. Can you talk about what it was like when jurors were looking at that video in the courtroom?
Sure. The jurors mostly had poker faces. None of them really reacted. And again, this is a video that was widely seen before the trial, so I suspect many of them had already seen that video when it was released. And the point of them playing that, again, as you mentioned, the defense said this was not about domestic violence. He was not charged with that here. you know, it was alleged that he bribed a security guard after, paid all of this money, like $100,000, to get a copy of the video so that it would never see the light of day.
Right.
His attorneys argue that was just to protect his image, and because Cassie Ventura didn't want it out there. She had a movie premiere. She didn't want it, it to go to police. They argued it was not so that police would see it. That wasn't the concern there. And of course, that's not what prosecutors said. And they brought in this security guard who says he accepted this money on behalf of himself, his boss, and another security guard. And they provided a copy of this video. And the security guard, his name was Eddie. And so Combs was like, "Eddie, my angel, thank you so much." Was so appreciative that he had given him a copy of this video. But it got out anyway.
Yeah.
It was released, and then we saw it again at trial. And it also went to the prosecution's point of that coercion, the fraud, the force, which again, he was found not guilty of. But that was why that video came in, because again, he was not charged with domestic violence.
You know, Alice, one interesting thing I found with this was I've covered court cases in and out of New York. The jury wasn't sequestered here, and that was a 7-week trial. Do you think that had anything to do with any of the outcomes of this trial? I mean, they were instructed to not talk to this case about anyone. They were instructed to not watch any media or look at any media. But yeah, I mean, do you think that had anything to do with it?
I mean, it's interesting. I think, we were talking about this in the press room. I don't think a jury has been sequestered in decades here at this particular courthouse.
Yeah.
And it's a high-profile trial. Again, people likely saw that LA hotel incident video before this trial even started. I mean, jurors were asked this during jury selection, but they were told, block notifications on your phone. Don't look at any stories of the case, which I'm sure was no easy task because this is everywhere. It's all over your phone, on social media, on your newscast. So whether or not they were able to follow that to a T, I don't know. We're waiting to see if jurors will want to talk. They are anonymous. We don't know their names. We know their ages. We know a little bit about them, but that's for their protection because this is such a high-profile case.
Yep.
But we're waiting to see. Maybe they'll come out and talk to us. We have so many questions, especially want to know how they were able to come to that unanimous decision
Within an hour.
so early
after
this
being
morning.
Deadlocked. Yes,
That's right.
For the most part of yesterday.
That's right. And, they deliberated, like you said, for a total of 13, 14 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking like it took them a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So curious to hear more from them, and hopefully they'll speak with us.
As our viewers are as well. Alice Gaynor, thank you so much for joining us right now, giving us that perspective inside of the courtroom. We'll send it back to you guys in the studio for now.
Jennifer Bistram, thank you. Alice Gaynor with your insight. Thank you so much.